Earth Defense Force 5 is a goddamn delight. That's really all you need to know. Go buy it, play it, that's the end, that's all. But I guess I can come up with more stuff to say. I'll always love games that push the boundaries of storytelling, graphical fidelity, character development, and package all of that into new, innovative gameplay. But now, with so many developers and publishers chasing that North Star, it's almost more refreshing to encounter some of the few modern games that throw all of that out of the window and give us radically simple yet solid experiences that deliver boatloads of ridiculous, meaningless fun without taking themselves too seriously. Few franchises have as firm a grasp on this concept as the Earth Defense Force games do, and no Earth Defense Force game accomplishes those goals as well as this newest installment does.
There must be a monster nation further ahead. My eyes are blurry. I'll help you.
If you've ever played an EDF game before, then you get the idea. Blast your way through insect, aliens, robots, and other unspeakables that look like they were ripped out of an old 1940s horror sci-fi movie while picking up new weapons and abilities to make yourself more deadly to more powerful enemies later on. Thankfully for Earth Defense Force 5, this overall structure hasn't changed at all. Everything that you got out of the previous installments is here, just iterated on in some small ways that make the experience even better. The biggest, most common complaint about EDF games is the tanking frame rate. And while I think it's a little unreasonable to expect a game like this to hold on to a rock-solid frame rate throughout, EDF 5 definitely does a better job of hanging on to its frames than any previous installment has, despite there being more detail and more on screen than I can remember there ever being in any of the previous games. While some frame rate dips are inevitable, especially in the later stages, I'm pretty impressed by how well this game can run all of the chaos of giant robots falling from the sky, buildings collapsing, hundreds of giant ants scrambling all over everything, and multiple NPCs fighting alongside you. That being said, you don't play these games to marvel at graphical prowess. You play them to have simple, stupid fun. And the stupid fun shines even brighter online, where you can squad up with several friends or some randos to bombard the hordes of monsters together. This, in my opinion, is the ultimate way to play the game. If online isn't your thing, the massive amount of levels are still great on single player, and weapons that are earned in either mode are accessible no matter how you want to play. It's also nice that you can earn weapons and abilities for other classes that you might not necessarily be using at the moment. This ensures that you can switch to a different class at any time in the game and not have to worry about being super underpowered. Speaking of classes, I had more fun playing around with the different types of soldiers than I ever have. In previous EDF games, I generally just kind of stuck to the wing diver because of the mobility, but in this game I really don't feel the need to do that. Even though there really isn't much new in terms of the types of classes that you can choose from, certain perks and improved controls and movements make all the classes more viable and versatile than they've ever been. That being said, there is definitely a trade-off with power and mobility, and that basic rule hasn't changed. The graphics actually look pretty good considering how much of the emphasis in these games is typically put on quantity. And it's not going to be winning any awards by any means, but it definitely looks better than the previous EDF game on the PS4. The music and voice acting is just as cheesy and silly as previous entries, but I did get the sense that EDF 5 might be leaning into its silliness a little bit more than the previous entries. And it's for the best in my opinion. Line delivery reaches levels of corniness that I haven't heard since Starship Trooper, and the Mars Attack style music has never sounded better or more fitting for what's happening on screen.
It's no use! Permission to retreat! Help!
Now, if I'm being honest, there are a few things that annoy me here. My biggest gripe is probably not seeing any kind of major indicator of what I'll be facing off with in any given level. Many of the enemy types, especially in later stages, can go from easily dispatched to downright impossible depending on your loadout. This puts you in a situation where you might end up stuck or getting your ass handed to you 90% of the way through a 20-minute level, having to retreat, change your weapons and do it all again. A simple way to avoid this would be to have some sort of warning about what is coming up, so I could adjust my loadout accordingly before the level starts. But alas, every level is a crapshoot. It's not a massive problem, but retreating from and having to restart a massive level over just a simple weapon change does threaten to bring your momentum to a halt, which is super noticeable in a game like this that relies so heavily on its fun factor. And I'm a little annoyed that after all these years, this totally avoidable situation still persists in the series. I'm also a little annoyed that EDF 5 is only digital for us here on the Western Hemisphere. That's probably not the developer's fault, but it's something to keep in mind for those of us that prefer our physical copies. And I really don't like knowing that in 20, 30 years or whatever, when PlayStation Network ends support for PS4, my ability to play this game will completely go away if I ever have to wipe my hard drive or replace it. And that is the long-term problem with digital games in a nutshell, but that's a conversation for another time. Despite its niche genre and style, I think it can be thoroughly enjoyed by a wide variety of players as long as they don't mind turning off a few sections of their brain. It might ultimately not be for everybody, and I completely understand if it's not for you, but EDF 5 wears its heart on its sleeve. It doesn't pretend to be anything that it's not, and despite a couple of grumbles I may have, Earth Defense Force 5 is a goddamn delight, and that's just really all you need to know.
All those monsters born inside the cave?
Come out! How's that?
What on earth is up ahead?